So this is the rugby league fixture. Everyone's up in Queensland, and here's the AFL fixture. Your mob are down in Canberra, which is great, but this was an opportunity to actually get a situation where AFL owned New South Wales. I'd like your mob to be called the New South Wales Giants, by the way, but I digress. But if you were in Canberra and instead of it being Collingwood-Sydney at the MCG, it was Sydney versus Collingwood at what was ANZ, whatever they call it these days, how much, that would have been sensational, wouldn't it?
Had one on the Friday night, Giants playing in Canberra on the Friday night. Have Swans play Collingwood on the Saturday night.
So everyone's looking for a blockbuster. Can we put the graphics up of the fixtures, please, and the crowds over the years? So have a look at that. I mean, 72,000 was back in. That was the one-off game in Sydney. There was a rugby league game that night, but there was no AFL games other than that night. But you go through, apart from finals, Sydney versus Collingwood at the bottom. So 60,000, 64 for home and away, and 72,300. You know how much of an impact that game had? I got a phone call a couple of days later from Bob Carr, who was the Premier of New South Wales, who didn't know anything about football. He openly said that, didn't know anything about any sports. And he said, I will offer you, Collingwood Football Club, $5 million cash and all expenses to play Anzac Day up in Sydney.
On the back of this game?
Off the back of this game.
Which was played as a standalone capacity 3 years after the Olympic Stadium had been paid for by the AFL to be configured for
a football ground,
which has now been lost.
But not only that, they're going to pay for everything. They're going to put the battleships up the river out to the ground, the whole business. In the end, we went to the AFL and said, look, there's a real option here for some things. We've got $50 million out of the state government of Victoria to fix up and refurbish the MCG AFL members part of the Southern Stand. So everyone shared in it. We didn't put the pocket the money and run. We didn't want to leave Anzac Day, obviously, from the MCG. But that's the impact. And I spoke to Lewis Martin, the head of Channel 7's football and sport, tonight just to check. He said, no, we're happy to go to Sydney. We actually thought it was a bit strange as well. Now, I know the fixtures come in a bit late and all this, but you've got to be nimble enough when the opportunity comes, when Peter V'landys, on a day we're announcing Tasmania, goes, oh, we're going to put a second team in Melbourne, which is complete nonsense. We should have been there and owning Sydney this weekend. You don't have to do gather round, you can just do big games.
Jimmy, we heard John Longmire speak there. I mean, you're on the board of the other club in that town, and the talk from our part of the world, Melbourne, is that the two Sydney clubs are feeling neglected. Yeah,
just using the fixture, for example, there's some key time slots.
What about generally, though? Forget the fixture.
Well, that's part of it, Damo, is the fact that the fixturing can help a lot of those issues, that you can condition the market. So they clearly love watching games Saturday at 4 o'clock. So there's many opportunities that the Giants and Swans can always play Saturday at 4 o'clock. You condition the market, whether that be home or away. So they can do whatever they do in the morning, and they've either got a game that they're going to, or they're watching one on TV. So that's just the start of it. You'd love the investment back into development and grassroots footy. Maybe bring the zones back, which were taken off both of those clubs as well.
And Cola?
Cola, well, it's actually a real thing, but you can't say that word without people like to my left here who got rid of it, because
it's really hurt everyone. How many grand finals have you played in? How many of the Swans played since Cola went?
We can have a mature conversation about
the Brisbane Lions, they're going terrible, aren't they?
And actually acknowledge that there is a real cost of living difference.
There are, and you know what? And I was happy for it and supported it.
You're the biggest one to tear it down.
I turned. I'll tell you why. Because it ended up being how many cleaners or housemates that Buddy Franklin had. I'm happy for the young players who haven't got the money to pay for that, but I'm not getting extra for somebody on over $1 million. Don't rort it, and you'll be right.
This will be the same issue we have with Tasmania. So they'll go really well, and we'll have vocal presidents try and tear down.
Not vocal presidents, don't say that, because I'll tell you what it led to. It led to the Western Bulldogs in Melbourne having a chance at winning a flag as well, because equalisation came in, and the clubs who you say are vocal presidents were the ones who signed off and came up with the idea to keep everyone going. So I'm not going to cop this rubbish anymore. I'm not the president anymore. I'll tell you straight what happened there. You overbaked the cake. In the end, you burnt it.
Hey, Damon, can I just say before we move on, would Travis Old put the fixtures together and look at it and go, OK, this is a weekend we can nail this down? So in terms of, say, looking at the NRL fixture, or would they not even look at the NRL fixture?
Well, again, I don't know how it works. I don't know the logistics, but I would have thought a vacant Sydney in gather round when they take it to Brisbane would have been a time to schedule at least one. That'd be my take on it, yeah.
Collingwood's got to play X amount of games in Melbourne for fixtures for the MCG, all that sort of stuff, and it would have been done, and probably before they came out with the NRL. But you've got to be able to move on these things. It's guerrilla warfare. I think we have to weaponise the fixture absolutely at the moment. We spoke on our podcast the other day, and we agreed on everything so far until 2 minutes ago. But I put the proposition to you, Jimmy, that GWS should play all its games in Western Sydney, half its games in Western Sydney and half in Canberra. And don't worry about going to Perth or Adelaide or even maybe play a couple if you want to, make it 10 and 10. But you should be up there non-stop playing football in New South Wales. You should be the New South Wales Giants, because if we do that, we can actually spread the footprint of football without having to bring in teams all the time.